Horizon Forbidden West, Burning Shores, the DLC for Horizon Forbidden West, which is only available on the PlayStation 5, the PlayStation 5 version of the game. So, last year, Horizon Forbidden West, the main game, came out to market back in February. That was one of the better games that came out last year, although Forbidden West was overshadowed primarily by Elden Ring, as well as a few other games. When I uploaded my retrospective last year for this game, my stance on the game was very straightforward. Horizon Forbidden West was a strong game graphically, and control-wise, the game controls appropriately for the type of game that it is and the genre that it's set in. However, the game suffered in two major areas. The first being the story, which was noticeably far worse than the original Horizon. And gameplay wise, it wasn't that great either. While the exploration was just as good as the first game, if not better, the actual combat system left a lot to be desired. And this is why I had put the game down and haven't returned to it in pretty much a year until I decided to go through this DLC, which is $20 on PS5. So regarding the points that I had went over with this game a year ago, I must say that nothing has really changed. Everything is pretty much the same. It's not largely the same, it is the same. This is the same game that I covered last year. There have been no significant improvements or changes of any kind. The exploration in the game is still fantastic, although one significant problem with this specific DLC is that the new area that it adds really is just another island towards the bottom of the map. So it doesn't even feel like it's actually unique or original. And if I compare that to the DLC from the first Horizon game, the DLC area of the map within Zero Dawn has a much more defined presence in that game compared to the Burning Shores in Forbidden West. And even though apparently this DLC takes place in California, because they have the Hollywood sign and whatnot that was in the debut trailer for this DLC episode, the level design really doesn't emphasize the fact that you're in California. A lot of it just looks exactly the same ruins, the same jungle areas, the same islands and whatnot that you have in the main game is still present here. The only thing that's noticeable really is the Hollywood sign. So they didn't really take advantage of the actual California theme, and you don't really feel like you're anywhere special or again unique or original. That is definitely a wasted opportunity. Another issue with this DLC, as I mentioned before, is that it really changes nothing about the game, for better or worse. For better, the environments and whatnot, as far as exploration, all of that is still good, but nothing else has been improved. Particularly the bloat. Starting off with the bloat. You have all of these different weapons that you acquire. A lot of them just don't feel special. There's way too many blast slings and, slingshot, rope casters. There's so many different types of weapons. Instead of them just simply adding in a weapon and then that weapon upgrades over time, which I think would work better for an RPG presented in the form that Horizon is presented to the player. I think that would have worked better if they had went that direction. Instead, this goes for a more traditional RPG approach, like one of the Final Fantasy games where you get all these different weapons in these different categories. It just feels very bloated. And that also holds true with the skill trees. There's, 6 skill trees in this game? And all of them have too many nodes. some of the skill trees aren't even really useful, such as the traps, the trap skill tree. And the reason that's not really useful is because it takes way too many resources to craft these items. And there's not really a fine balance as far as economy of resources versus the amount of resources that it takes to craft items in this game. So things such as the trap skill tree just feels shoved in, like they were just checking a box. And then finally, you have the combat system. And the combat system just is not, it really isn't good. And the reason it's not good isn't really due to the mechanics of it, although the dodge roll system obviously is far worse in this game than it was in Zero Dawn, primarily because they ruined the amount of distance that Aloy covers when you actually perform a dodge roll. And then after 3 dodge rolls, she gets tired for some reason, and then there's like a delay animation before you can roll again, and that just leaves you vulnerable. And they removed the dodge prowess ability from the first Horizon, which was the extended dodge roll ability, and that makes it even harder to avoid attacks. And all of this I highlighted in my original retrospective. Also, the machines, a lot of them just are not fun to fight. And this time around, coming back to this game a year later to see that nothing's been fixed and everything is the same, it really pissed me off to an extent, because it's like you guys had a year to fix some of these issues and you just haven't. Aloy still gets knocked around like a rag doll, and there's animations literally where the player is locked into that animation and has to watch her get up, like literally get up off the ground, and it takes like 5 seconds of a delayed animation for her to get up. The machines can just do whatever the hell they want. Their aim, like, I was playing against some of these like frog-like machines. They were slinging these acid balls at me, and their aim was like 100% perfect, regardless of how far away I was or how close to them I was. Their aim would always hit, like, if not me, then the immediate space next to me or behind me or in front of me. It's fucking ridiculous. And I was playing this game on normal. I noticed once again, and this is another issue that I had with the main game as well, where the machines are designed to be damage sponges. Against you, even just on normal difficulty, the machines can deal damage that takes away more than half of your health, literally within like 1 or 2 hits. And this is just on normal difficulty. And that just means that the game is severely unbalanced, and there's really no excuse to be had for that. In order to get a proper challenge, I had to drop the game's difficulty down to the easiest difficulty setting. And if you want an actual proper challenge to where everything is fair and balanced, there's a custom option. You essentially have to switch the game's difficulty to custom, and then drop the game's difficulty down to story mode, which makes dealing damage against the machines fair. They stagger faster than the higher difficulty settings, much faster, and the damage you deal against them is actually appropriate. But you can set Aloy's health to normal, so it still feels like there's a proper challenge that you're getting out of the game. If it were not for the custom option, this game would be it would be boring. And it baffles me that Guerrilla Games hasn't fixed this glaring issue of poor balancing with this game over a year after the initial release. Again, there's no excuse for that. Gameplay-wise, nothing has changed. Everything that was good about the game is still good now. Everything that was bad about the game is still bad now. Everything that was weak is still weak now. So all you really have left is literally the story. And the problem there is that the story really isn't all that good. This isn't a terrible storyline for this DLC. Essentially what it is one of the Zeniths has a spaceship or whatever, and is trying to leave the planet before the threat of Nemesis arrives to Earth and destroys everything. And Aloy has to find a way to stop him. And essentially, that is the story for the DLC. One of the main problems with this storyline is that the Zeniths were not interesting characters or even well written characters from the main game. In fact, the Zeniths were one of the biggest problems with the story of Horizon Forbidden West. Essentially because they were boring, one note, and they overemphasized the sci-fi theme. And so the indigenous part of Horizon's world has essentially been abandoned outside of the aesthetics of like the art direction. This DLC does nothing to change that whatsoever. And to make matters worse, they introduced this new character called Seika. And Seika is from this random tribe, and you meet her at the beginning of the DLC. And she's pretty much with you from the beginning of the DLC all the way through to the end. And she's not really that interesting as a character. But you're forced to play through several missions with her. This includes in like underground dungeon areas. This includes quiet sections when nothing is really going on. And she stops just short of being annoying. But what's really baffling is what they do at the end of the DLC, which is this romance option where Aloy can choose to spark a relationship with this character, and they share like a kiss, which seems to come out of nowhere. You know, there's been a big backlash against this decision by the writers of Horizon Forbidden West. The problem with it is that it's forced. There's literally no build up to it whatsoever. And it can be argued that, you know, this is another situation, this is another case where game developers are shoving in homosexual propaganda into these video games. It's pissing a lot of people off, you know, rightfully so. It's not that homosexuality within of itself is the problem. The problem is, once again, it just seems like it's being shoved in there, almost as if the game is preaching to you. So I can understand why people are upset. What they did, they made it optional to try and soften the blow, you know, the backlash. Because I'm pretty certain that the developers knew, you know, the writers knew that people were going to have a problem with this. So they said, well, you know, why don't we just make it optional? It's like, no, it shouldn't have been in there at all. It just shouldn't be there at all whatsoever. The only thing I'll say against this particular case, I don't think Aloy in particular is just straight gay, because in the first game there was this optional romance option with the Sun King, who is obviously male. So if anything, Aloy could be seen as bisexual. The difference here is that she actually oscillates with another character in this brief scene that they put at the end of the DLC. Yeah, the way this was done, the way this was handled is extremely poor, and Guerrilla Games definitely deserve the negative feedback that they got from that. That did not need to be in this DLC whatsoever. The boss at the end of the DLC was the most interesting part of the entire thing. There's a really interesting parkour action set piece leading up to the boss fight. That was the most enjoyable part of this DLC by a landslide. I thought that was handled extremely well, including the stealth-based level design leading up to that sequence. I also thought they did a good job there. The actual boss fight itself left a lot to be desired. Really, this was a by-the-numbers boss. The only difference is that, oh, it's gigantic. It's like Godzilla size. It kind of points out another problem that I had with this DLC, which is the fact that it's not available with the PlayStation 4 version. So anyone who bought the PS4 version of the game can't play this DLC for some reason. And I don't think it has anything to do with the fact that they couldn't achieve this boss on PlayStation 4. I think it literally is they just gated it to the PlayStation 5 version so they could try and entice people to go out and buy a PS5 to play this DLC. And this DLC isn't that long. It's only maybe about 5 to 7 hours. I had put down my controller quite a few times with this. There were some spots where I was just running around. I got bored and I was like, fuck this. I put my PS5 in rest mode and came back to it. All in all, I think that this was just kind of a waste. The only two new additions that was really added, you get this weapon or whatever. It's like an assault rifle on your arm is the best way that I can describe it. And it's actually very useful in combat, and it looks cool. So they added that, and then they added this water wing machine that can dive underwater. It's basically the sun wing, but it can dive underwater, and so you can explore the depths. The problem there, though, is that similar to the other flying mount, is that you can't actually attack while you're on the water wing. So it's purely an aesthetic, an aesthetical addition, which leads me to question what was the point in adding it in the first place. All in all, Horizon Burning Shores, it's not bad, but it really is a waste, and I don't think this was worth $20. They should have priced this minimum at $10, $15 at the very most. This was not worth $20, and for anyone who only has this game on PlayStation 4, they're not really missing much here. The story, once again, is not really good. It's very by the numbers, and the new additions, as far as like the new characters go, just bland and again boring. That's the DLC for Horizon Forbidden West. Nothing special.